Okay.
No issue.
On to you, Noah.
All right, great. Well, thanks for the time, Ari. It's
Oh, wait.
really from
Sorry.
yeah.
Start over. I accidentally muted you when I was muting everyone else.
Well, great. Well, great. My name's Noah Starr. I'm originally from Jericho, New York, like Ari. I currently live in Dallas, Texas, after studying at the University of Texas at Austin. In August of 2016, as I'm sure many of you remember, it was the heart of the presidential election in the United States, and also Brexit kind of was about to take place. And I don't know if you remember, but at the time you would scroll on social media and see all these viral videos about, Trump supporters and Hillary supporters being asked by journalists, basic questions about our country, about our history. And, a lot of the answers were, so like a question was, who did we gain our independence from? And, someone would say Mexico or Spain or a country that obviously wasn't the correct answer. And the video went viral because it was humiliating and hilarious. And, I'm sure many of you might have even considered sharing it or liking it. But as the election, as the campaign progressed, more and more of these videos would appear in, social media. And I became worried and scared and embarrassed, frankly, that so many people could be this ignorant and uninformed about our basic history. And when it really hit me was when there was a question I didn't even know the answer to. And I'm supposed to be, educated. I went to college, I went to high school, I'm supposed to have the education required to live an informed and good life. And I didn't know a basic question about our history. So I kind of went down the rabbit hole of historical illiteracy in our country and read a damning report by some nonprofit organization for civic engagement, basically how, college graduates just couldn't understand fundamental questions about our history. I think it was only 33% of college grads knew that the First Amendment included free speech. So I went down this rabbit hole and asked myself, what could be done to combat this historical illiteracy problem? And eventually I decided to create a media company that aimed to elicit a new age of historical enlightenment in this country, focus solely on history. And that's kind of how Truth Serum originally was formed. But also another force at play at the time, and still to this day, was media bias and, fake news, if you will, reporting stories using clickbait or biased headlines, at the time divided society, especially when Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were facing off. And of course, to this day, still plays a role in that. So I came up with the name Truth Serum from, any superhero show. If you inject someone with Truth Serum, they're forced to tell the truth. So I decided to call this media company Truth Serum History. At the time, I started releasing Facebook videos on pivotal historical events. There was a video on Kurt Cobain, a video on Martin Luther King Jr., on Ted Williams, on, all of these famous icons, and quickly, racked up over 500,000 video views on Facebook. We had over 5,000 likes in a really short period. At the time, I was a junior in college, so this was really fun. But also at the time, Facebook started partnering with large media organizations and paying them to create this content. Some of those players were Now This and Mashable and, CNN and other social media companies. I wasn't one of them because I was too small. So I pivoted to Instagram and started making daily photos about history. And the page kind of grew. Now it's 2020. We have over 45,000 followers on Instagram. We release photos, videos. We partner with other history channels on Instagram. We're constantly making content. We're about to start a new initiative on our website where we, cover events and people more in depth. And it's just been a really interesting ride, and it's been a great side project for me over these last few years.
Yeah, thanks for that, Noah. So I think, to start, one of the things that I know you did in the beginning was like you were doing videos, then you switched to pictures. I think for a lot of folks here who are writing content, some are writing blog posts, some are doing video, some are doing images. How are you able to determine what channels were where you were finding value, and how do you know that the content you were creating was valuable um, for the audience and that it resonated with them? And what tips do you have? I know it's a long question. What tips do you have for folks when they're trying to find, I don't like using the word product market fit in this scheme, but sort of that click where like, oh, this content that I'm creating is valuable and the audience really enjoys it.
Sure. I would say you can never really know until you experiment. So if you have, ideas for content, you should just put it out and see what kind of response you get. Even, I've spoken to Ari multiple times about, specific types of initiatives that I was doing, whether it was a newsletter, or whether it was videos or photos. So in the beginning, all I was doing was experimenting. I mean, my first video that I ever published, and I remember sitting in my house and I was incredibly nervous because I thought people would look down on me, or I just felt that anxiety that I'm sure a lot of you feel before you hit the publish button on something. But it was on Johnny Cash, and you can find it on our Facebook page. I don't know, maybe it has, 5 to 10,000 views. It wasn't that big. And then our next video was on or Leonardo da Vinci. I think that, was only 4,000 views. And then Ted Williams was like 10,000 views. So it was like a steady, I think people like these videos. I enjoy creating them. I think they're valuable because I care about these historical figures. But you never really know, and I didn't really know until I released the Kurt Cobain video. And, one of the pillars of Truth Serum is objectivity, which is incredibly difficult to actually implement in a media company, as you guys recognize, because we're all human, we all make mistakes. But the Kurt Cobain video was the one that really gave me that market validation. It had a perfect storm. It was about Kurt Cobain. Nirvana fans are some of the most dedicated and loyal fans out there. And obviously his story is incredibly tragic, but it also has a ton of controversy. Our headline for the video was, "On this day, Kurt Cobain commits suicide." And that did not go over well with a lot of fans. I think the anniversary of his death it was actually April 1st, I think, or it was pretty recently. But, a lot of fans believe Courtney Love actually killed him. And there was a documentary called Soaked in Bleach on Netflix that you could watch. And ton of controversy. We got, over 60,000 views in like 2 days. And I'm just a junior in college putting this out into random groups on Facebook. And that's when I realized people care about history because everything that's ever happened is history, and your favorite bands, your favorite shows, your favorite athletes, all your favorite politicians are all a part of history. So as long as you select the right content, people will care. And that we got hundreds of comments, most of them bashing whatever this truth serum was. What kind of truth serum is this? This isn't the truth. This is lies, all the stuff like that. But that's when I realized that people do care about this stuff. People care about these videos and the idea that we're bringing history to the forefront. So, to answer your question, in the beginning, you need to experiment and kind of just see what sticks. Regarding which platform and what content is specific to each platform, that just takes you being a user of all the different platforms and understanding what do you like to look at and watch when you're on a certain platform. When you're on Instagram, you typically like to see photos, like engaging photos, or square videos, 1080 by 1080 videos that you have text that's big enough to read and it's going relatively quickly. So you could look at it for a second and know whether or not you want to watch this video or scroll. For YouTube, it's, standard, more, standard TV dimensions, and it's typically a person talking verbally. There's not really text on the screen, but that's more of a long form type video content. Facebook, it's, the same dimensions as the YouTube videos, but, there's text on the screen typically. It's not like YouTube where you have people talking in the background about politics or what have you. So you just have to become a user of all these different platforms. And I would suggest finding the one that you like to use most and make an experiment with content on it.
So on that note, I'm sure like from a professional point of view, a lot of people here are using LinkedIn to like social, but we sort of seen this new shift, both I think personally and professionally, to like short form video, right? So even on LinkedIn, you're seeing that, but now you have Quibi, you have TikTok, you have the founder of Vine created a competitor to TikTok. I'm drawing a blank on the name. Do you think both like personally and professionally, we're going to see this shift towards like people doing these like short form videos, and that's going to be the new way people are consuming content? Do you still see, things, the more traditional channels like, the LinkedIns, Facebooks, even Instagram is getting old, ironically. Like, do you see people continuing to use those channels, or do you see, people have to experiment on these new channels, and it's also partially because like they're unexplored, so there's bigger opportunity to sort of have a platform there and have a stranglehold.
It's interesting to see the different types of demographics that go on each platform. Obviously TikTok has taken hold the younger generation, people younger than you and me, and we're in our early 20s. Um, you have seen, I mean, people already are making these short form videos. My friends, people I know personally and people I follow professionally, have transitioned from articles to short form videos. I write articles also. And, some people have mentioned, why are you not, turning your articles into videos? That's what people want. And I think that's true to a large extent. Video has for sure cemented itself as content that people like to engage with, as content people want to see. And, the more human you are in front of the camera, the more, well received you typically, the better engagement you typically get from people. Regarding the new platforms, TikTok and others, yes, I think if you have the bandwidth, you should experiment with them. I haven't with Truth Serum because, frankly, Instagram was my success channel. We did pretty well on Facebook. We've tried some videos on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. We have a Twitter channel, but none of those really took off. And I recognized that pretty quickly. So rather than dedicate time and resources and energy to platforms that weren't experiencing as much growth as Instagram, I redoubled my efforts on the one platform that I knew was constantly growing, constantly giving me good engagement, and constantly providing value to people. That's not to say I'll never, explore with TikTok, but it's also, like I said, you want to create content for platforms that you're on. If you're on LinkedIn all the time, what articles you like to read on the platform. What descriptions you typically click see more for. How they're formatted. What type of lead-in question there is. You just understand the platform. What I would not recommend you do is you say, hey, TikTok is new. TikTok is growing like crazy. There are so many people on it, and that's the platform of the future. One, who the heck knows what's going to happen in a year from now, let alone 5 years from now on these platforms. Two, if you've never used TikTok before, imagine a history video on that channel. I mean, TikTok, which I've gone on and have used before, is a lot of just funny memes, funny dances, funny videos with friends and young people kind of doing stupid things that are enjoyable to watch. I've never seen an educational video on TikTok. Does that mean there can't be one? And maybe people want some educational videos on TikTok? Maybe. But I don't use the platform enough to say, there's a way to bring history videos to TikTok. And if you're a TikTok user, you would probably laugh at the notion that you'd watch history videos on it. So yeah, I would make content for the platforms that you use, but don't be afraid to experiment with new platforms too.
I know John had a question that he put in the chat, but I'll let him ask it. But before I do, just to say, there is a TikTok educational section. Like I do a lot of research on TikTok because I have more free time as of late. There's like this one channel, Money CEO, and the guy's an idiot, like in my opinion, but he talks about like IRAs or like 401ks or like, basic financial modeling and like how to save money for like millennials. He was like one video that I remembered, he was like, you can become a millionaire. And then his assumption was that the S&P 500 would return 10% year over year with the money you invested, and it would be tax free. So it was like he made these assumptions that were just like way out of left field, but there are people doing it. He didn't have a ton of followers. He had like 30,000 followers. So I think it's beginning to happen. But yeah, to your point, like I don't know if that will be the platform where people are like, I'm gonna get my financial advice from TikTok. But Josh, I'll let you ask your question.
Sure. No, I appreciate it. I mean, you've had a chance to do a lot of editing. This is where I find I'm losing all my time is just trying to play with it. I didn't know if there was one platform. I know Bob's got one here he's recommending. I wanted to find out your platform that you've gravitated towards that really shortened your editing time and got your videos out there faster.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think it depends on what type of video you're making. I think that, honestly, like Apple iMovie is probably the cheapest and fastest thing to use if you don't want to spend money and you have a Mac. What I've used for the more professional things are the Adobe Premiere and After Effects programs. Those take a bit more training to understand and to actually implement. I've worked with video producers who have helped work on those platforms, but I think it really depends on how sophisticated and professional you want your videos. If it's just you talking on the TV, like on the screen, like a YouTube video, I think iMovie works great. If you want effects and things like that, there's obviously Avid, but I've used Premiere and After Effects through Adobe.
So no, I think for a lot of folks here, they're either creating content or starting to look into creating content. I know from my personal experience, like with my newsletter that I run now, I'm up to about 1,200 subscribers, and it took me 54 weeks, right? So it took me a while to get that. I just received my first paycheck for monetization, which is like a huge milestone for me. But for someone like you that has a lot more followers than me, where should when should people go like, oh, I should stop and find a new content, or go like, oh, it's going to take 20 weeks, 30 weeks, a year to get to that follower inflection point? Because I think that's one of the things that people don't get with content is like, I'm going to write an article, I'm going to post it to like Hacker News, or I'm going to post it to like Facebook, and it's going to go viral. And like, that's not how it works. So like from a follower count perspective, how long does it take for someone to go like, okay, I'm going to produce, an article every week, and like, I'm going to hit my inflection point in X, or, I need to sort of find that new content channel because this one's not working, where have you found success from that point of view?
Again, I think it depends on the type of content you're making and what your intention is. If your intention is to make $1 billion with a new content idea, obviously rapid growth would be the number one thing you care about. If you're trying to just have a side project and do something for fun on the side, then obviously I would work on it until it's not fun for you anymore. But the best way to understand if your content is resonating with people and providing value is to talk to them. In the beginning, when Truth Serum had 500, 1,000 followers on Instagram, which probably took a month or two, and I had to migrate over some followers from Facebook into Instagram. But, talk to people who are leaving comments, talk to people who are liking, the video or the photo, talk to people who are DMing you, especially, and ask them, how long you've been following the page? Why do you follow the page? What was your favorite photo? Why was it your favorite photo? What could we be doing better? Are you willing to share this with your friend or comment your friend? Why or why not? And one, you'll have really interesting conversations with people. You'll also have some not so great conversations with people. As you would imagine, a history page getting bigger, you have, people on all sides of the spectrum from different countries, states, what have you, DMing. And sometimes I'll get into a conversation with people who have a worldview that is entirely different than mine. Do I care about their feedback? Absolutely. But you also want to recognize who are the type of people you want to attract and, be your community. Who is your customer base? Who is your follower base? And obviously try to have conversations with those people to see what you could be doing better, and what type of growth you should expect. But also on your question, it depends on the platform. YouTube, what matters more, subscribers or views on a video? Like which one determines more success for your video? I would probably say views on that video and likes on that video outweigh the number of subscribers that channel has. There are channels that have 1,000 subscribers and videos with millions of views. Does that mean what they're doing isn't valuable because they don't have the subscriber count? No, it means that some of their videos do really well, some probably don't, and maybe they should figure out on how to convert more of their viewers. But talking to those communities is the best way to find out if the content you're making is valuable.
And I guess on that note, like, what are the questions you ask people that you thought resonated? I think one of the mistakes people make in these types of conversations is asking like the wrong questions, or like making assumptions and just like pushing those assumptions down the user's throats. So like, how did you know that the questions you were asking were like good questions that got you valuable feedback, but two, that you talked about worldview, like say someone here is posting for financial advisors, and then like they ask someone, but it's really not their primary audience, and that's more black and white. But I think what happens with a lot of content is like you have this silent majority that it's like the 90% rule of like 1% elicit give you their feedback, but you have like 90% that really makes up the majority of your viewers that you never hear from, that you're like trying to engage with, that you don't. How do you like know that? How do you get like feedback from them? How do you know that the feedback you're getting is truly valuable, or it's not like this one-sided view from this one viewer that's really not important to you?
Yeah, I mean, the law of averages probably in the long run, the more people you talk to, you'll probably get a better average feel for the followers. I would say two things on this. My approach originally to getting feedback from people was what you're typically taught. Make a survey, send out the same questions to everyone, try to get results that you can look through and really like analyze and be like, hey, I should be doing this better. This is what the community thinks. I found for Truth Serum itself, I can't speak for products or for other types of businesses, but for Truth Serum, it's better for me to have a conversation, like a full-on conversation with someone, than to just ask random questions that may or may not help me. The conversations, like a real genuine, paragraph-long conversations I get into people, I find the most value. One, they're showing me what they're learning from my posts. They're telling me about the side research that they're doing. They're telling me about the article they wish I wrote so they didn't have to research it themselves. They're telling me about their political leanings so I understand how to communicate with them as an objective, quote unquote, objective media company, but also, understanding their backgrounds. I can also I can also see where they're coming from, and probably, if you understand their backgrounds, you can kind of guide the conversation in a way that doesn't piss them off, but also you get value from. I think it depends. For Truth Serum, I'm trying to appeal to every person, whether you're a liberal or conservative. So, I don't want to alienate people. If you're just trying to get financial advisors, it doesn't matter if you alienate the artist necessarily. So I think it's being careful with your wording, but also asking open-ended questions to kind of get a conversation rolling, and just be a real person and ask questions about, why are they finding your content valuable? What should you be doing better? And they hopefully will lead the conversation, and you just ask follow-up questions. And then the second piece about the rule, I don't know the actual percentages, but how like the most obnoxious or quote unquote most engaging people don't necessarily represent your constituency. That's entirely true. The best example I can give is when I would post a photo of Barack Obama, and the photo would probably get 3,000 likes. And this was part of like a content initiative. It was called Polarizing Figures. And the first photo it was like Barack Obama as a young kid. You should know what he looks like, but it's like, who is this person? And, you know, the post got maybe 3,000 likes, and it was DM'd to hundreds of people, and it was posted on people's stories. But there were probably 400 comments, and 90% of the comments were incredibly negative against Obama. At that, you know, how do you reconcile that? You have a lot of negative comments, but you have 3,000 likes. I would argue that more people actually liked the photo than who really disliked the photo through a comment. So what you have to do is you have to DM the people who are commenting, but you also have to DM the people who are liking. And at that ratio, there's 3,000 likes to 400 comments, you know, 350 of the comments are negative. You know, you'll probably find you'll find your like average actual constituency or follower through that method, I think.
Bob, I see you have a question, so.
And I have not been looking at the chat. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, the chat. I'm monitoring it. Don't worry.
It's okay.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, you see the Quibi or whatever coming out, right? They're putting a couple 100 million into it. What's her name from?
Meg Whitman.
Yeah, Meg. Yeah, HP and eBay.
Jeffrey Katzenberg. Yep.
Yeah, involved with that. So you're on to something here. One interesting thing is, and there's a company called like Mental Floss magazine. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Some of my friends actually helped fund that years ago. And so they're talking about science. So there's a little bit of debate in that, but history, who writes history? The winners, right? The losers don't write history. So you're really in an area where people will have opinions that you really can't argue some of them, right? You know, if something boils at a certain temperature, it boils at a certain temperature. But, you know, who started that war? It's like, well, each side said the other one started it, right? So, you know, I guess that's where you have to navigate, and the raw emotions come through. So those got to be some really interesting conversations.
Oh yeah. I mean, you know, the best example I use, I've talked about, is the Kurt Cobain example. Like you said, history is written by the victors, or it's skewed by the people currently in power. Not necessarily the same thing, but the Kurt Cobain example, what I originally did, my initial mistake was to just say it as a fact that he committed suicide, which is the technical police report, right? That's a fact according to the police, but it's not a fact according to all the fans. So what I think is needed by media companies, not just Truth Serum, which, you know, is honesty about where their source is coming from, and how do they actually know that what they're stating is what happened. You know, when you think about history or the truth in general, how do you know what the truth is? It could be that I could be saying to you right now that I spent this morning working for my, but how would you actually know that without seeing a camera into my room? So the truth is subjective, and it's written by the victors, and people don't agree with what the truth actually is. So it's obviously very challenging to navigate it, but the only way to fight through that is to admit that you can't know for sure. So for Kurt Cobain, the year after, when I reposted the video, it's, hey, according to police reports, Kurt Cobain committed suicide. However, many fans believe that, there was another, conspiracy with Courtney Love, whatever. Just stating kind of what the playing field looks like. And, also just saying, we're going to pick the police reports as our quote unquote, reporting here, but let's acknowledge that we don't know for sure, because no one really knows for sure.
Yeah, I like that angle. You're acknowledging there could be other ones, and that can diffuse it tremendously. Plus, that's part of history, right? That it was debated. Did he commit suicide or was he murdered, right? And we could talk about, what's his name? The guy who died in prison, allegedly being hung by himself.
Yep.
Yeah. Same
Epstein,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all, I mean, what it's, I don't know if any of you have been seeing Tiger King. I haven't watched the full show, but I had a conversation with a friend. It's like, did OJ Simpson murder his wife? Did Epstein, commit suicide in jail? Like, all of those things will have a quote unquote official verdict, whether it's via a court or via the government, but no one could really know for sure. And that's what makes them so interesting and so so emotional for people. And that's honestly why people fall into clickbait, because when you bring up these controversial topics and frame it in such a way that elicits a lot of engagement, a lot of emotion from people, which sucks, but that's kind of how it works.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, talking about like that polarization of content. And but even it happens with like what I would consider pretty bland content. Like people just try to hijack you. You're seeing it even with like Zoom now, with like these webinars that Zoom had to change their thing. Like people are Zoom bombing, and that's like a bit different. But it's like, if people have an opportunity to do something polarizing, they sometimes will, just to like draw attention to themselves for whatever reason. And it's just kind of unfortunate. I want to see.
But yeah,
Oh,
go ahead.
what were you gonna say, Noah?
I was going to say, I try to find the line between clickbait and writing interesting titles, right? So there's, the definition of clickbait is in my opinion, is a headline that is misleading intentionally. And however, you could also make a headline that actually, so I'll give you an example, right? So if I were to post a picture of, World War II, of Adolf Hitler giving a speech to all of Germany, the way you can frame that speech obviously will drive engagement. And I think, you can frame it as, the Chancellor of Germany gives a speech to all of his constituencies, or you could frame it as the worst human being in human history is giving a speech to his constituency. One of those questions or titles will probably drive more engagement. I'm trying to be objective, so I want to play more in the middle and acknowledge, the crimes against humanity without also, falling into the emotional clickbaity headlines.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I wanted to actually formally open up and see if anyone else had any, other questions as time begins to, wind down, to see if anyone had any questions. I'll let, John, were you going to say something?
Well, I was going, at this point, no, I'm seeing you've been doing this for a while. How do you keep yourself excited about doing it so that you don't consider it a job or a task? Instead, it's something you keep motivated. What keeps your energy rolling?
Yeah, that is that's a really important question. It's incredibly difficult to stay motivated with a project like this, even though when someone a random person will look at it and be like, holy shit, you have this many followers? That's insane. To me, it's really nothing, because, it's not my primary source of income. It's my side project. So how do you stay motivated? For me, I go through ebbs and flows. I'll have months where I am super dedicated and all I want to do is create more content and start new initiatives. And then other months where I'm like, I don't even care. I'm going to post stuff because it's already, created, but I'm not super excited. It's a challenge. I don't have that figured out. What really helps me, and to this day still helps me, is talking with my friends about it and having a conversation like this about it. Like, after this Zoom, I'm going to be jazzed up. I already planned to start a new initiative with a friend who's going to help me write some stuff. But, by talking to other people like yourself about, the story, Truth Serum, the value it's providing, and finding new initiatives, that's the way I kind of stay afloat, but it is an ebb and flow.
Yeah, I think that's also like a good, oh, sorry, Mal, just to add, but I think it's also a good point. Like, you're at 44,000 followers, and like CPM for Instagram, and CPM is cost per impressions. It's like what, like $2-3 for for per 1,000, right? So so you're talking like 50 to $100 per sponsored post when and if you
Hey,
get.
it's more depending on the type of account, but yeah, it sounds like a lot of people, but monetarily it will not support my life as of now.
Yeah, so I think that's good to just for people to put in perspective when it comes to like monetization. It's like you need 1 million followers to really like turn it into something. But Matt, yeah, I'll let you ask. I know you had a question.
I was just going to ask what the goal is with it for you then.
Yeah, appreciate the question. I think I've decided to play the long term, the long game, where, growth trajectory is still up. We're at 45,000 followers now, and 2 months ago it was at 39. So still engaging with people, still excited about it. Long-term vision for Truth Serum is to actually be able to work on it full time and create history content to educate people, whether it's through online courses, through long-term videos, through mini documentaries. Content is king, and there's never been more content created, and there's never been a bigger demand of content. I mean, this quarantine thing, even before this quarantine, content demand was through the roof, and now content demand is through the roof like no other period in human history. So I think that there's a void in history that needs to be filled. There are not enough educational platforms out there creating engaging and compelling and concise content, in my opinion. So I think the opportunity is there. And, as the page will grow and as my resources grow, then hopefully I can start, developing a show and developing more pages and creating a genuine media company.
Yeah, and Michael, you had a question that you posted in the chat. So
Yeah, hey Noah. So my question is around how did you get the word out there? How did you get eyes on your content? How did you, in what ways did you try to bring people in?
Yeah, appreciate the question. So in the early days when I was on Facebook, the benefit of history, and honestly, the benefit if you're going to write on LinkedIn and you have a specific, industry or topic that you're going to write about, you can kind of plan ahead of time of how you're going to outreach each video or each article. So for me, I knew I was going to release a Harry Potter video, which also did well. I think that has 100,000 views on Facebook. So, a week before on Facebook that I was going to publish this video, I joined every Harry Potter group on Facebook I could find. And I friended people who I knew were Harry Potter fans. And when I actually released the video, I sat in my computer for a few hours and just copy and pasted the same little title and link to the video in every single group. And that was kind of like a hacky, growth hacky way to attract eyeballs. But that's the only type of thing you can do in the early stages, because if people go to your account and you have 75 followers, it's really difficult for them to want to follow you because of the bandwagon effect. People like to follow the big accounts. It's kind of weird to go to a page, see that they have 100 followers and be like, yeah, I want to follow them. But that's why the early followers are so difficult. But the growth hacky ways of spreading your stuff, joining random groups, messaging random people who are interested in the content. Another strategy I used on Instagram was, well, how do I know, thinking about my audience, how do I know if you're interested in history? The number one way is that you follow history, like the history Instagram channel. So what I would do is I would go onto the history Instagram channel and scroll through the people who liked each photo, and I would message them and say, hey, aspiring history channel, wanted X, Y, and Z, will you give my page a look and follow me? And that probably had a 10% success rate early on, because I was conversing with people. I was a real human being. If you try to actually message the history channel on Instagram, you'll get nothing back. So, people would suggest content, people would, follow, and, it's just doing all of those things to try to get in front of people without spending any money. You're just spending your time.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Noah.
Yeah.
I know.
Do you spend money now to get followers or drive?
The only money I spend now is on scheduling tools like Iconosquare or Photoshop or, content driven stuff, which is not that much money. Sometimes I've done some influencer marketing where, like, I have pretty good relationships with all the big history accounts. I know it's pretty awesome. I mean, being friends with all these history accounts, but like Historic has 600,000 followers. I have a relationship with him. History Colored relationship with that guy. So once you develop relationships, sometimes they'll post your stuff for free. Other times they'll say, hey, I'll do 5 posts for, $75, in which case I've said yes, because it's not a lot of money and they'll get a lot of exposure. I have found that Instagram ads for me suck. They never yield real results. They don't get a lot of follows. They don't get that many impressions per dollar. The influencer marketing stuff, that for sure works. On a post through Historic or a post on any of these other big channels, my dollars go a long way, and it's not a lot of dollars. It'll be, $20 to $50 a post for some people and a lot less for others. So it really depends, but influencer marketing would be my number one spend if I had a marketing budget.
And I want to be mindful of time. We have about 5 minutes left, but if anyone else has any other questions, let me know. I think my one last question I had for you, Noah, was, so, I think everyone here is actually from Northeast Ohio. I didn't do a good job. I got to start marketing this outside of Cleveland. So the Plain Dealer newspaper in Cleveland, they laid off like most of their staff today. And do you see sort of this trend, coming from doing history, that people are going to start getting their news from like social, and it's going to stop being from traditional journalism? I'm sure like fake news and this whole trend of fake news is interesting to you as someone who's like trying to run an objective history channel. Do you think, you as running your Instagram account now could be like a news source eventually? Do you see that becoming the new trend, or do you think, journalism is going to get, reinvented in some way? Obviously that's a lofty question, but sort of, focusing more on you and what you're doing, what are your thoughts on like you being a news source or journalism source? Have you thought of it that way?
Yeah. So just to restate the question, you kind of cut out a bit. The news sources of the future, are they going to be like traditional methods, or are they going to stay on channels like myself or on, social media in general rather than traditional news? And then also, could Truth Serum become a news company? Is that kind of the question?
Yeah, correct. So, yep.
Okay. So the first part, you're already seeing people get their news from non-traditional sources. How do I get my news today? I subscribe to newsletters. That is very different than years past. And the news companies I subscribe to aren't Wall Street Journal or New York Times or Washington Post. It's Morning Brew, it's The Skim, it's, Axios Sports, it's all these other new media companies that have kind of filled that void. So the way you get your news has already shifted. It's a permanent shift. Local news has been destroyed. I'm sure you see a lot of Scott Galloway talking about these issues, but yeah, the way you get your news has changed fundamentally. You're getting it through Twitter. You're getting it through your trusted sources, which, on Twitter are the people you follow, on Instagram, the people you follow, Facebook, your friends. So that has definitely changed. Regarding Truth Serum itself, I think, originally, yes, that was the plan, but I've also, kind of backtracked on that. We have enough companies focusing on current events. And in my opinion, we don't digest enough breaking news. We just react to it and move on to the next thing. So I think that I would want Truth Serum to stay focused on history and cover history, for the foreseeable future and help people digest what has happened and learn from it. We have enough companies focusing on today's events.
Cool. So as we wrap it up, any last questions from anyone? Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. I'm gonna send out a recorded version of this so you guys have it. And just so you all know that, so sort of these series of webinars is part of a bigger thing that I'm in the process of launching. I'm going to be launching a product for teaching, brand strategy to folks and brand management. So, things like social media, creating content, doing PR. I sort of see this need to help people with topics like this. And, I don't think you need to go hire an agency to go do it. So like, how do you learn it yourself? And this is sort of, creating filling that gap rather. So, folks like Noah and folks like Peter, next week, I'm going to be having on a business coach. So I'll send everyone out a webinar for that, but she's a registered psychotherapist and business coach. She'll be talking about communicating with employees and other stakeholders about dealing with anxiety and how to get through that. I know it's a very pertinent topic with coronavirus right now, and making sure that we don't freak out over what's going on. So look for that link, and yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Ari.
Have a good one. Bye.
All right, you guys.
Thanks, y'all.